The following program contains shocking portrayals of action. If you suffer from cowardice, Randall may not be right for you. Check with your video game supplier.
Standing for truth in the four corners of America. Fighting for justice on the frontiers of the culture wars. And turning resistance into an art form. The only TV host arrested more times than Mahatma Gandhi, Randall Terry.
Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm not the Koran destroyer. The Koran has within it the seeds of its own destruction. Lies. Oh, that's a good sign. I am so glad to do this show. Thank you for being with me. Today's top stories. Christine O'Donnell wins big in Delaware. Karl Rove fighting for his political survival. And probably over 20 people thus far dead in protests around the world over the so-called desecration of the Koran. We're going to talk about it. Today's program brought to you in part by the Tea Party. We're on fire, baby! And by Karl Rove. Oh, I've been burned. First, a quick word from my friend, Sir Reginald Bling.
Just turn the thing on. I got something to say. The mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, has said that people who do not think that a mosque should be in New York City at ground zero, that they are un-American. Hey, are you Jewish? Do you need to wake up and smell the pomegranates? They will kill you, homeboy. If you went over to Pakistan or to Arabia, someplace like that where you say you're Jewish, they would slit your throat from ear to ear. Then you can come back to us and say, who's un-American? Wake up, boy.
Welcome back to the program, friend. In a moment, we will discuss the rising death toll around the world regarding the so-called desecration of the Koran, the planned burning of the Koran, which was canceled in Florida, the pages that were burned in New York, Tennessee, and perhaps elsewhere, as well as the part that we played in tearing pages out of the Koran here in Washington, D.C., in front of the White House. Pages that called Christians and Jews infidels, blasphemers, passages that called for Christians to be banished or imprisoned or murdered or crucified. This is a sober moment in the battle between truth and deceit, between freedom and oppression, between the love of life and liberty and the tyranny of Islam. And as I said in our press release that we sent out over the weekend, and in my words that are being played and read literally all over the world through the press coverage that we got, I say it again right now. It is time to end the charade that Islam is a peaceful religion. Some of you might know that on Monday of this week, I did an interview with Sean Hannity on his radio show and had an impromptu debate with a Muslim woman who believes in Sharia law. It was very intense. You can find it online. But basically, the history of Islam and the history of what has happened to Coptic Christians cleaned her clock. And so, as I said at the press conference in front of the White House on Saturday, as I said on Sean Hannity's radio show, I'm saying now, and I say to my American detractors, it's time to read the Quran for yourself. It's time, perhaps more importantly, for you to study the Hadith, the words of Muhammad that are not in the Quran. And you can see for yourself the direct connection between the words and deeds of Muhammad and the words and deeds of terrorists or those who are calling for violence and those who are perpetrating violence around the world. Let Islamic history, let Muslim theology speak for itself. And then judge for yourself. Now to the news. Christine O'Donnell perhaps in the biggest upset for the Tea Party movement, clean the clock of Michael Castle, the Republican favorite, the Republican candidate, the former governor, the 9-term House of Representative member. She beat him 53-47. This was a huge, huge upset. The establishment has already said they will not fund her. Andrew, let's go ahead and roll some tape from Fox News to show people what we're talking about.
A lot of people have already said that we can't win the general election. I know. It is those same... Yes, we can! It is those same so-called experts who said we had no chance of winning the primary. It will be hard work, but we can win. And if those same people who fought against me work just as hard for me, we will win.
But the national committee that helps Republican Senate candidates says they will not give any money to O'Donnell. No financial support for her.
Special thanks to Fox News for that clip. Now, listen to the energy in her voice. Look at the enthusiasm in the crowd. And look at the egg all over the face of the Republican establishment. I have been saying on this program for months that part of our biggest problem with the loss of American liberty is the GOP. Remember these words. An enemy outside of your gate makes you vigilant. An enemy inside your camp makes you dead. Because he can poison your food in the day, he can cut your throat in the night. Speaking about enemies in the camp, let's talk about Karl Rove. Oh yes, look at Karl. The former President Bush's top political advisor, the man who orchestrated his victory for the White House, a man who is a squish, a rhino, Republican in name only, a baby-killing left-winger masquerading as a Republican who cares only about power. And right now, Karl Rove is fighting for his political survival. Karl Rove has been on these television shows saying that Miss O'Donnell can't win. Well, first of all, that's what you said about her, Karl, when it came to the primary. She can't win. You dismissed her. What this is really all about, ladies and gentlemen, is that people like Karl Rove want power, and they despise the ethics of the Tea Party movement, the smaller government, the right to life, that marriage is between a man and a woman, that our tax burden should be way lower, and this socialist plantation has got to end. Listen to me. Karl Rove helped construct the social plantation in which you and I are the slave labor force. Don't forget that the first massive bailout of banks and insurance industry came in the latter days of the Bush administration, in which Karl Rove was one of the chief architects. He is a part of the problem. So I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. When the Republican National Committee or any national body of Republicans calls you and asks you for money, or sends you a letter asking you for money, say to them, take your fundraising bull stuff back to hell where it came from. Goodbye. Click. Give money to good candidates like Miss O'Donnell and Rand Paul and Sharon Angle out there in Nevada. And say to the Republican establishment, you're as much a part of the problem as the Democrats. In fact, you're probably more a part of the problem because you pretend to be conservative and you're lying. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to discuss the heartache, the turmoil, the violence that's happening all around the world because of the so-called desecration of the Koran here in American soil. You're not going to want to miss it. Don't go away.
One of my friends is breaking his smoking habit by sucking on an electric cigarette. It gives him a shot of nicotine with every puff. I think he's just changing brands to a brand he could smoke in the house.
Moments with Moses. You shall not see your brother's donkey. or his ox fallen down by the way, and withhold your help from them. You shall help him to lift them up again.
I was in church this morning at Mass praying, and a thought hit me about the debate over whether or not we should desecrate the Koran, tear pages out that call for our murder, burn it. And what hit me was, people don't believe in truth anymore. Many, many people, some of you watching, many of our detractors in the media, don't believe in objective, metaphysical truth. They don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he died for our sins, that he rose from the dead. They don't believe that Muhammad is a false prophet, and therefore the Holy Quran cannot in fact be holy, and in that way it cannot be desecrated. People don't believe in truth. Pope Benedict released a press statement this morning that he is praying for religious liberty. Well, in many ways, that's praying for the end of Islam, because you can't have religious liberty under Islamic law. Let's go to the news and let's talk more about this. In Kashmir, right now the death toll is at 18, according to various press sources. In Afghanistan, people are dead. Protests have been happening in Somalia, in Tehran. In Tehran, I quote, people gathered and they chanted, "Any Muslim's silence is treachery to the Quran. Islam is the victorious. The U.S. is annihilated." When I ask to our detractors, before we talk about the death toll, when will you have the intellectual integrity to end the charade that Islam is a peaceful religion? Oh, they'll say, but the Bible has many incidents of violence. Read the Old Testament. You know what? Shut up. We're talking about the New Testament and Jesus and Christianity. All right? Jesus never killed anyone. The early church suffered for 300 years of persecution. Muhammad killed people with his own hand. Muhammad urged his followers to kill others as a means of evangelizing. So stop with your polemics. Stop with your shallow, nonsensical read of history. Stop with your asinine assertions about theology that you've never studied and you couldn't fight your way out of a wet paper bag. All right? Stop with your bumper sticker sloganeering. When will you have the intellectual integrity and the courage to simply say, Islam is not a peaceful religion? Look at Saudi Arabia, look at Pakistan, look at Egypt. And oh, by the way, when will you have the integrity to say the only reason that the West, what we call Christendom or Christian civilization, has the rights and the liberties that we enjoy is because of Jesus Christ? All right? I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to deal specifically, when I come back, with the ramifications of tearing pages out of the Quran, burning the Quran, and a discussion as to when we should do such a thing again. I'll be right back.
I'll even donate my voice so that you don't cluck like a clucking, moronic, stupid peahead. I'll give you my backbone and my voice box if you just promise to use it.
A man is called a reactionary if he objects to having his property stolen and his wife and children murdered. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back to the program, friend. A Christian school in Kashmir was set fire by Muslim militants. Police fired into the crowd, killing, according to some accounts, 7, others 8 people. 1 policeman was also killed. Other conflicts between Muslims and the police in Kashmir have resulted in 17 or 18 people dead. This has been going on for literally years there. Pakistan used to fund Islamic terrorists, which was one of the reasons why Pakistan was on the terrorist watch list. This is nothing new. We are horrified and saddened by the burning of the building, by the loss of life. As I mentioned earlier in the program, other people have been killed in other nations. Protests are happening all around the Islamic world. I ask you this question: who is to blame? There are people who have been covering what we did at the White House. Stories have run literally all over the world with my words saying, how long will we keep up the charade that Islam is a peaceful religion? Andrew Beecham tearing the Koran pages out, throwing them in the garbage bag. Passages that called for the murder, the killing, the banishment, the crucifixion of Jews and Christians. Passages blaspheming Christ, denying the Trinity, etc. These images and these words going all over the Muslim world have literally been seen and read by tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of people. And of course now, in addition to those images, the things that we discussed in New York and in Tennessee, there's a backlash. Who's to blame? Well, there are some people that say it's your fault. People like you who won't let a sleeping dog lie, who do and say things that are incendiary. Let's use some illustrations. What about the bully on the playground? What if a bully is picking on you and you say, I'm going to tell the teacher, and the bully says, if you tell the teacher, I'm going to beat you up more. Or if you tell the teacher, I'm going to beat up those 3 girls over there. If you go to the teacher to turn in the bully, are you to blame for any other acts of violence he does? How about an abused girlfriend, abused wife? There are people that say, women who will say, well, I deserved it. I said this and it really ticked them off. No, don't get that warped victimization thing, self-blame thing going. There's a thing called free will. These Muslims who are doing this have free will. They are choosing actions. Who's to blame? Well, for the actions, the people to blame are the ones that are committing the crimes. But what's the fountain of inspiration to blame? As we saw in earlier programs, the words and deeds of many Islamic terrorists are linked directly to the words and deeds of Muhammad. It was Muhammad who ordered the murder or the execution of people who satirized him. It was Muhammad who killed hostages and authorized others to behead them. It was Muhammad that authorized the beheading of 600 or 700 Jewish men. It was Muhammad that used the sword to bring people to submission to himself and to Islam. So the fountain of inspiration is also to blame. I mean, let's turn it back on Christians. Bibles are burned, torn. Christian buildings are burned down. Christians are martyred in Islamic lands. When that happens, how many of you are afraid of a Catholic priest rising up and starting to slaughter people? How many of you are afraid of an evangelical pastor going on a rampage and killing civilians? No. Because the fountain of Christianity and freedom is different than the fountain of Islam. Who's to blame? The people are to blame who commit the acts. The people are to blame who promote the acts, not us. When we tear out passages of a book that calls us heretics, calls us blasphemers, and calls for us to be crucified, we're acting in self-defense and we're acting in defiance of the schoolyard bully. And we're going to keep doing it. I'll be right back. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your foes. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day you lead your host upon the holy mountains. John Quincy Adams said, "The command to propagate the Muslim creed by the sword is always obligatory when it can be made effective. The commands of the prophet may be performed alike by fraud or by force." Friend, John Quincy Adams had the courage to properly discuss Islam. Will we, or will we at this great distance bow our knee in fear? Stand for the truth.